fire in the midnight glow. Scary clowns in a wicked show. My excitement's reaching a peak, giving terror all this week.
Terrifier 3 is hands down one of the best horror films I've seen all year. And no, it's not due to its objective merits, but because Terrifier 3 exceeds every expectation I had as a die-hard fan. Since I figured we'd get a film that was much like the second, with the same tone, style, and pacing, but with a Christmas backdrop to help introduce some freshness to the IP. Damien Leone manages to top Terrifier 2 by crafting a superior sequel that shows vast improvements across its technical aspects, storytelling, and character development, proving that he's a creative that's willing to learn to flourish rather than bend the knee to secure future projects. Todd Phillips.
Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Terrifier 3 opens with a short scene following the post-credits events of Terrifier 2, where Art's most notorious victim, Victoria Hayes, has given birth to an Art head inside the walls of a psychiatric institution. Love-struck by Art, the pair find their way to an abandoned house and enter a sort of hibernation. Fast forward 5 years and the pair are unceremoniously woken by some pesky demolition inspectors. Coincidentally, at the same time, Sienna Shaw is released from a mental health facility, where she spent those same 5 years attempting to move on from her fatal encounter with Art the Clown. Released into the care of her aunt and uncle, Sienna reforms a bond with her cousin Gabby, a 12-year-old who basically idolizes her, while also trying to reconnect with her younger brother Jonathan, who's now in college and coping by adapting a strong silent persona. However, Sienna is not all well as therapy and medication aside, she's still haunted by her loved ones and Art himself. And these hauntings turn into so much more as Art, alongside his sidekick Vicky, manage to track down the remaining Shaw family in order to capture Sienna for their own hellish master plan. What makes Terrifier 3 stand out most is that Damien Leone hasn't gotten comfortable in his style of filmmaking and has chosen to evolve. While the shift to make Terrifier more story-based with the introduction of Sienna Shaw in Terrifier 2 was appreciated, and it certainly excelled in gore, the film suffered from a lot of issues that weighed it down. Primarily choppy pacing, overdrawn scenes, a lack of basic shot composition, and a very slow execution of elements. Terrifier 3 doesn't hold back on the blood and guts, thankfully, but beneath the chopped-up body parts is an actual film that builds a narrative rather than a glorified special effects reel. The tale of Sienna Shaw continues beautifully into Terrifier 3. Leone has previously stated that Sienna was a very personal character to him, and thus she was crafted with a lot of care. Her debut in Terrifier 2 had all the workings of a soon-to-be final girl, with Sienna drowning in anxiety in the year following her father's equally tragic and ominous death that turned her mother into a reactive single parent and her brother into a serial killer-obsessed preteen. While the pacing was slow, Sienna's scenes displayed a young woman who was on the brink of adulthood and struggling to find her own emotional footing, spiraling into what seemed like endless panic attacks. Her father was her confidant, her inspiration, and with his sudden death, she struggled to move past the trauma that has left her in a near-permanent state of stagnation that even her friends haven't failed to notice. With heavy allusions to something more supernatural, Art the Clown becomes both her nightmarish mortal enemy as well as her reason to evolve past her weaknesses, embracing the warrior persona her artist father crafted for her in order to save her brother and attempt to end Art the Clown. Now 5 years later and fresh out of the psychiatric facility that kept her from complete insanity, Sienna finds that she's still very much stuck in that stagnant cycle of fear. Fear that Art is still around and that his presence is the work of something far more demonic. Her arc throughout Terrifier 3 doesn't regress her back to that spiraling teenager, but instead crafts her into a young woman who is haunted by her past and desperate to protect those she loves. Sienna Shaw is an embodiment of Terrifier 3's strongest theme as a result, family. Just as her mother's rash mood and her brother's ignorant indulgences never destroyed those bonds for her, that questionless instinct to safeguard who she has left is core to Sienna's development. Terrifier 3 expands on this instinct by working in an aunt and uncle alongside her younger cousin Gabby, who never stopped seeing Sienna as something akin to the warrior she transformed into in the final act of the last film. While much of Sienna's father's character was left largely up to interpretation in Terrifier 2, Terrifier 3 utilizes dream sequences and flashbacks to develop the franchise lore, in which the conception of Sienna's Valkyrie warrior was connected to premonitions her father had, that subsequently led to his accidental death. These flashbacks help further reinforce those heavy family themes, continue to build up Sienna's backstory, and adequately lays down the foundation for Terrifier 4 to unravel the rest of this specific narrative element. As Sienna is propelled forward to defend and protect her family against Art the Clown, Art himself no longer stands as simply an unfiltered representation of evil, but rather a symbol of the devil himself. For long-standing fans of the franchise, this should come as no surprise, as Art's first appearance in the 2008 short film The Ninth Circle, aptly titled after Dante Alighieri's Inferno, saw our beloved clown take a victim back to hell, where he encountered demons and Satan himself drinking blood. And while the allusions to Art being something supernatural weren't forgotten, Terrifier 3 cements the lore as Art, a former serial killer, is now a conduit for the devil who seeks to spread evil and chaos while possessing as many hosts as possible, much like the beast with 7 heads from the Book of Revelation. This development also further emphasizes a lot of the biblical allegories and symbolism Terrifier 2 explored. I can't do much justice to it, but if you're curious, I highly recommend checking out Brian Keeper's article over on Bloody Disgusting. To complement the biblical allusions of Art, Victoria Hayes takes over the expositional scenes for Art as his sidekick, explaining the deeper purpose behind our favorite murderous clown in the final act of the film. However, prior to this, she's given ample screen time in the first act to demonstrate the reach of both Art's influence and the devil's powers. Victoria Hayes ends up serving as one of the many instances that showcase Damien Leone's incredible growth as a writer, as Victoria becomes the front and center manifestation of what hell can do to a once pure and uncorrupt soul. She also is the driving force for what I would argue is the most disturbing scene of this film. Using Art in this same creative vein, Leone adapts more dynamic framing with his shots, switching from the uniformity of digital to wide-angle analog that allows for more gripping slaughter scenes, as seen in the family bloodbath that opens the film, and allows Art's personality to shine more. Art's previous appearances never hid that outside the getup, he is a bit of a clown. It's honestly what makes him so beloved. The third entry takes all this to the next level and utilizes all of Art's scene not to simply display how depraved he is in his killings, but who he is as a character. From the more eccentric facial expressions to whole body actions, Art seems to have grown into his own shoes. No pun intended. The best scene of the film, where he encounters a mall Santa at a bar with his friends, all played by some notable character actors by the way, is a great example of Art's further development, which was quite surprising as it didn't feel like there was much left to uncover in his personality. Lovable Art and his lore aside, the change in camera and frame composition opens the door for Terrifier 3 to be more visually colorful than the last two mainline films. The stale color palette is replaced with one that fully takes advantage of color that mimics the emotional tones of every scene. The Christmassy scenes take advantage of warmer lighting and color colors, whereas more void environments like a city bus or college shower emit mute, cooler tones. In all regards, color and lighting is never sacrificed to make the gore shine, as is seen in virtually every single one of Art's kills throughout this film. Much like those aforementioned fun actor cameos in the bar scene, Terrifier 3 steps into horror icon territory with the change in shot composition and color, paying homage to films like Alien 3, The Shining, Black Christmas, Hellraiser, and The Evil Dead, and going so far as to use them to not only expand the lore, but open the door to theories that thankfully don't hamper what the IP has built thus far. The Cenobite blacksmith, which is shown in the trailers, seems to be controlled by a Mother Mary statue, further reinforcing the biblical allegories and hinting that Sienna's sword is something crafted by angels to help protect her in her fight against hell. In this shot, we see armor, however, in the hands of the blacksmith, and it's possible he's creating some for Sienna's final fight against Art that will hopefully take place in hell. My own 2 cents, I think this blacksmith is Sienna's father's soul, who with his knowledge of his daughter's destiny was given some sort of protection by heaven in hell, but couldn't be saved completely from its depths as self-deletion is a damnable moral offense. This theory would also lend some credence to the idea that the Shaw bloodline was destined for this fight, and in creating Sienna's warrior, her father was attempting to prepare her for what he saw coming. I believe he'll make a return in Terrifier 4 in a scene that will also reveal Jonathan isn't dead, but likely captured just like Gabby. Additionally, the instances where Art's personality shines, I believe, provide a glimpse into who he was in his human life. As previously mentioned, Terrifier 2 hinted he had killed many children, and in the opening hibernation scene, one of the demolition investigators tells his co-worker an urban myth about how this house was where a person buried a bunch of children. Art likely returned to this house to recuperate after his pretty intense face-off with Sienna, in the same way vampires return to their burial grounds to restore their powers. If the child serial killer angle is true, then Art's behavior when encountering the mall Santa and his ability to lure children later in the film at the mall bombing may allude to the fact that he had an underdeveloped childlike psyche as a human that's bled into his demonic reincarnation. The few problems that Terrifier 3 lies solely in some of the leaps Leone has taken film over film. Some of the edits are not quite as smooth as they could be, particularly in the second half of the film, where we see more of Sienna's dream and premonition sequences. The cut into the final living room scene is also quite choppy, and the end of that scene feels as though the film is supposed to continue, instead of abruptly end to set up a 4th installment. There's also some instances where the movie seems to be missing scenes for this reason too, most notably Jonathan's off-screen death. Further, the choice to hastily dump the demon lore in a rushed conversation between Sienna and Jonathan is a bit off-putting, as Terrifier 2 attempted something similar with Jonathan's serial killer fascination. But that was far better executed, as it was something that, while subtle, reinforced the mysterious terror consistently around Art the Clown. Regardless, all these minor issues seem as though they will be rectified in Terrifier 4, given that as it stands, I imagine 3 and 4 will form one continuous 4-hour film as opposed to 2 separate ones. Terrifier 3 is the Terrifier sequel that exceeds every expectation we could have dreamed of. Damien Leone exercises some serious creative prowess to develop a film that is so much more than just a reel of gory special effects, executing a near-perfect synchronicity between Sienna Shaw's more exploratory character arc and Art the Clown's maniacal glory. I hope Damien manages to keep this balance into Terrifier 4, as he now has all of us fans on the edge of our seats, eagerly awaiting what he has next in store. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by, and stay frosty, friends.